radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
I need your help to get to the year 1985.
You're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Good evening, Fade to Black. Bespoke Radio for the masses. Yeah. How you doing? How you doing? Today's Monday, September 16th, 2019. 260 days into the new year. Just 105 days left. We are live from a bunker somewhere in the middle of beautiful downtown Burbank, California. And I would like to welcome everybody listening all around the world. All across the United States. Hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south, far and near. This is Fade to Black for KJCR, the Game Changer Network, and KGRA, the Planet. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. What is cracking, everybody? How you doing? Yeah, it's Monday. Right before the show tonight, about an hour ago, my computer, my main computer that I use in front of me here, not the phones and not the internet feed, the broadcast feed, the video feed, but my computer with my notes and Twitter and email in front of me on these two screens decided to update. And right at exactly at 7, we start at 7 p.m. Pacific. It got to 100% and then restarted. Still spinning, so I have no show notes in front of me. I have nothing. I have nada. I don't have Twitter, man. I don't have email, man. I don't have the internet, man. No, I don't. It's all blank in front of me. I don't have the breaking news, and hopefully. Oh, there it goes. Did you see it light up? Oh, holy mackerel! It just lit up right in front of me. Okay, so really quick, we have a huge week in front of us on Fade to Black. Tonight, Linda Moulton Howe is here, and we've got a lot to talk about. So many breaking stories and research that she's been on top of over the last month or so. We're going to be going over that tonight. Linda Moulton Howe is here. Tomorrow night, now we have two amazing back-to-back first-time guests on this show. Starting with tomorrow night, Adam Apollo is here. Unbelievable. And then Wednesday night, Rhys Darby. Rhys Darby, actor, comedian, researcher, very funny, very smart. And he's been in New Zealand over the last month or so, and just got back and then had to go up to the Toronto Film Festival. We couldn't arrange that. Well, anyway, long story short, finally made it back to L.A., and he's here. So Wednesday night, Rhys Darby. And, oh, man, Murray. We're going to have Murray on the show. Talking UFOs. So, and then, of course, Thursday night is another Fader night with open lines all night long. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. I'm the Game Changer Network and KGRA, The Planet. I'll be right back after this short break. All right. Follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. At JChurchRadio. Email is Jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. I'll be right back after this short break with Linda Moulton Howe. Stay with us. All right, welcome back. Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Linda Moulton Howe. Tomorrow night, first-time guest Adam Apollo joins us. That's a huge show tomorrow night. Huge week for us because tonight, Linda. Tomorrow night, Adam Apollo. And then Wednesday night, actor, comedian, researcher, Rhys Darby. Flight of the Conchords, HBO. Absolutely incredible. Incredible. Rhys Darby here on Wednesday night. Adam Apollo Tuesday. Linda Moulton Howe. Tonight, somebody pinch me. Linda Moulton Howe. She's a graduate of Stanford University, master's degree in communication, has devoted her life to documentary, film, television, radio, writing, and reporting, productions, everything all around the world concerning science, medicine, and the environment. She has received 3 regional Emmys, a national Emmy nomination, and a Station Peabody Award. Of course, she has earthfiles.com, her own. The thing is this, her own research that is presented there is extraordinary. And all of you, I invite you to go and check out Earth Files. I spent so much time there. Now you know where I get my secret material. She has traveled the world. Venezuela, Peru, Brazil, England, Norway, France, Switzerland, the Netherlands, Yugoslavia, Turkey, Ethiopia, Kenya, Egypt, Australia, Japan, Canada, Mexico, the Yucatan, and Puerto Rico. Probably tonight she'll announce a couple of more countries to that list. I would like to welcome back to Fade to Black, Linda Moulton Howe. Linda, good evening. How are you?
Hey, Jimmy, it is great to be back with you, and a country I would love to add is Antarctica.
You know that's right. Soon.
I would really like to go there. I would really like to go to the Admiralty Mountains, where just recently this huge head, a half-mile long, has been apparently emerging out of melt. And you and I were talking about this earlier tonight, that I work with a U.S. Navy captain who, when I originally was sent those images and I sent them to him, I always let him go through his analysis. And it is, to me, something that is really more important. And I wondered if you felt the same way, that this should have been on the 6 o'clock news on the networks in addition to what was coming around the web, because the Navy captain who took the Google map, it is at Earth Files right now, it's a report I did on August 30th, he was able to rack back in time the Google images, and Google started in 2001, and he found 3 years later, 2004, in the Admiralty Peak, where this big, huge, half-mile-long face is, it was still there. It was in the 2004 Google aerial photograph. And when you have somebody who has a Navy analyst background, and they then go and study the latitude and longitude, and they go back through Google, I'm here to tell you this is not something that is dismissible. This is something that deserves the world's attention. And I personally am surprised that CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, and on haven't done a report about this.
What I find interesting about that is when you have the debunkers and the skeptics surface, and with a story like this, of course they will, and want to say that it's our imagination and, have fun with that. My response in this particular case, that is a face. You don't have to squint your eyes. You don't have to let your imagination go. It's a bleeping face, Linda, on the side of that mountain.
And the one that was floated around that we began with was 2012 date. And so it went back. And at my article that is updated with audio and video, the mountain-size alien gray face discovered in Antarctica, I go through that going back in time and showing how the Navy captain was able to take exactly the latitude and longitude that was originally released in it was an Instagram from UFO Scandinavia. And they put it out saying, take a look at this and give us your feedback. And then the Navy captain that I have worked with for 10 years, he took that latitude, longitude, and he went back in Google Earth, and the years are very clear. There is the September 28th, 2012, and then it goes, there's two with September 28th, and then it goes back so that you're going from 2012 back through the years to 2004, and that's these numbers of photographs that the Navy captain was able to find that still have that impression of that
it's
face,
there.
which
It's clear.
had been melting.
I'm looking at it here at Earth Files, and the 2004 shot, that it's the same face. And there's let me ask you this: you've been researching for so long. When you see this, and then everywhere you expect to find something anatomically, like the ear, the ear is there, right? The opening, the face is symmetrical. It's not asymmetrical. It is completely symmetrical. That, in a natural sense, how much of that could be coincidence, in your opinion?
Well, I don't think we're dealing with anything that is coincidence, and neither does the Navy captain, the retired Navy captain, because he did measurements. You know how you can measure in Google Earth. Mm-hmm. And he did measurements on the clear mouth, the nose, the left eye is totally open, and then you do anatomical ratios. You can study what are some of the ratios on faces. And these look like an Oriental type of face, and the measurements were consistent with if you had facial designs for where eyes and a human and nose and a mouth. Now, the issue is this supposed to be a half mile? And remember that. This is not small. This is half mile from the bottom of the pointed chin to the bottom of the pointed head, or top of the pointed head. So it's a half mile carving. We are getting into the issues of something like on in Cydonia on Mars,
right?
That huge 2 mile long plateau that I have seen that face on a highly sophisticated computer screen at the Analytical Sciences Corporation back in 1982. And that's when I first contacted Dr. Mark Carlotto, who was there working north of Boston, separating tanks from trees for the Pentagon. And it is Dr. Mark Carlotto who took a great deal of interest in that Viking photo that NASA dismissed it as, quote, a trick of light and shadow, close quote.
Right.
But Dr. Mark Carlotto and several others back in the early 80s, they disagreed, and they did a tremendous amount of investigation. And Mark Carlotto and I talked on the phone, and I told him I would like to do a documentary because I felt that we were really, truly looking at monumental architecture on Mars. And he agreed. And he said, I'd like you to come to where I can show you in my office on a large screen that we use what the full impact of this image is. And so I flew back to Boston, rented a car, went north to the Analytical Sciences Corporation. It was one of those situations where a guard has to take you to the elevator, and you have to have a guard that goes up, and you have somebody who is a guard that gets out, and you go into a bank of offices, and each this is hard for the white world to comprehend. In facilities serving the black world, it is very common for there to be red or green turning lights outside of each office door, which means it's compartmentalized that much. And this was an office that had those lights outside of a bank of doors. So I go to his office. I'm allowed only to go with him into the lab where they had to clear off every scrap of paper, everything in that room. And he takes me in, and it's a big screen. This was 1982, and I was sitting in front of I would estimate 2.5 feet, 2 3/4 feet by 2 feet high, which was big for me as a civilian coming from the white world to see a monitor like this. And he said, I'm going to activate it. And he said, and you're going to see a white dot of light will move across the screen relatively rapidly, and then the image will form. He said, I would just be really curious what your very first reaction is to the high-resolution image. So the dot of light starts, and I'm not having any expectation. I've already seen one of the smaller photos by then that had been in the news. But when the screen went from the moving dot of light to the full face, it was startling. It actually had an impact that was startling. And he asked me, he said, what is your reaction? And I said immediately, it looks like I'm looking at a frozen scream. There was something about seeing this huge head that there was no illusion about it being a trick of light and shadow. And I'll tell you in a second. But when I said that to him, it's like a frozen scream. His eyebrows, I remember, raised up. He said, well, you're not the first person who has said that to me. And the reason frozen scream at that high resolution, and everything I'm saying, think about the Oriental face, a half mile long in Antarctica, if it were completely cleared of all the snow and ice, that you would be seeing a huge, very detailed head. In this case, I'm now back to Mars. And on that screen, you could see horizontal bands coming off of the head. Think of Hatshepsut time in Egypt, when it was dark and black and gold, like stripes coming out across the forehead. It was as if, and Mark didn't know, I didn't know, they were thin lines that crossed in the middle of the forehead. And we said, is that holding on some sort of a headdress? What are these lines crossing in the forehead that you don't see in the so-called NASA trick of light and shadow images at all? Coming down to the eyes. Now, for people who are familiar, the left side of the face on Mars, there had been some sort of a landfall, a cave-in, who knows what had happened. But it didn't obliterate all of the features. The right side of the face is very clear, and you still can see a lot of the left side of the face. But I'm going to the right side. The eye, you could see like an iris with a pupil in the middle, eyelids, and the nose came down, and just like you were looking at a real nose that would go into nostrils, there was nothing about it that was interpretive. This was like clear sculpture. And it came down to lips and the lips were extremely clear. And this is the part I have never forgotten, because I remember turning to him and said, "My God, Mark, those are teeth." He said, "I know, that's right." And when I say that, in the less high res, you don't see the lines, the demarcations that we would see when you think of looking at a mouth that has teeth.
Right.
This had teeth, like separate teeth that you could see, and the mouth was partially wide open. And that was the part that gave the impression of something screaming. Now, that's how clear the face on Mars in Cydonia is on a high-end, high-resolution screen that the Pentagon hires companies to separate tanks from trees on satellites.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So now jump to this photo that just emerged in August, and the image that was first sent out was dated in the Google Earth of September 28, 2012, and as we just talked, the Navy captain could take it back in Google to 2004. That means that this same face was there, and there was more ice and snow, it looks like, on it. I think clearly anybody would agree in the 2004. And what has been happening in Antarctica? Things are melting.
Mm-hmm.
And that this is perhaps a process that is now inevitable, that whatever huge monolithic structures are there somewhere on the surface of Antarctica under the snow, that they're going to start emerging. And one of the interesting things is how this may or may not tie to what Spartan 1, the Navy SEAL whistleblower, has, with his own eyes, walked in these vast halls, 9-acre rooms, 2 miles down, where it's structure. We're talking nothing interpretive. We're talking huge, gigantic, structured hallways. And what did he say he was told that all of it was made out of? It was made out of black basalt. Jump to this photo here of the huge oriental type face, or gray face, or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
It is a half-mile long, and at least in the photos, when you go to the ice and the snow part, you can see that it is black rock. There's no question. It is black rock. Now, there's another puzzle about what Google did. When you look at the 2012 image, it is a golden tan or goldish color.
Yes.
And I asked Captain Wood, why would we go back through and down through all of these images that he went through? Why, for example, if you go to earthfiles.com and you go into my earthfiles.com report, which is entitled August 30th, 2019, that's only 2 weeks ago, and this is mountain-sized alien gray face discovered in Antarctica, and you scroll down through several of the images, you come to, this is a Google Earth map that has sections gold color overlay, green overlay, blue overlay, white overlay, and it even has some pink. And why is this? The truth was that Captain Wood said that the only information that he could gather about why this one particular area that contains this big head would have all of these colors, that Google would explain it as places where they have come in and done high resolution. But they don't explain exactly why all the different colors at the same patch. Now, when you look at this, if you're looking at that face in snow and ice, it's all white. Why did they choose the kind of goldish beige color for where this face is? you can't help but ask that question.
No, I'm looking at it now, and it's interesting how when you go back, you have a set of images here. I invite everybody, head over to Earth Files and see how Linda has this laid out. The research is excellent. And when you look at going back to the 2004 December 2004 image, that's what you would expect it to be, right? The color-wise. And then you have a October 2009 image. I'm cool with that, too. It looks like snow and ice, the colors. But when you get to the 2009 image, clearly it's identical. The features have not changed in 10 years. You know, and so you go to the 2010 image, it's exactly the way that it appears today, which is apparently 2000.
They made it gold.
I don't understand why.
Brown.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to ask you, let's go back to the, we've got about 5 minutes here before the break, to the basalt comments, because when you look at all of the openings here, all of the features, the eyes, the nostrils, the ears, certainly the mouth, and I see teeth there too, by the way, in my opinion.
There definitely is a mouth with something there, whether it is depicted as gum, tongue, teeth. It is as if a structure had been carved in the mouth as we would see teeth between lips.
It looks so. Is there? Do you think that this is basalt as well? A giant basalt face?
Well, I would love to know what this is made out of, and this is part of what I am actually working on now for updates. The Admiralty Mountains. What is the geophysics of the Admiralty Mountains? I know that there are a lot of volcanoes in Antarctica, and that's what basalt is. Black basalt comes from the lava of volcanoes. So is it possible that this particular face on this particular peak, that it was carved there because there was black basalt? And right now, tonight, I don't have that specific answer, but I'm trying to get the geophysics of the mountains worked out so that I can relate them in another report. What is the Admiralty Mountain history? And then where exactly are all of the volcanoes that we know are in the landmass of Antarctica, which is 2 miles up to 3 miles below the surface of the ice on Antarctica today, and that those volcanoes have been a target of research just in the last year or two, because there appears to be evidence that some of the volcanoes may be hot, and that could be contributing to the melting of the ice in Antarctica. It's another question. So you've got the ingredients that when Spartan 1 says that he was told that those black hallways and those black walls with the hieroglyphs and the symbols were black basalt, that would have been a material you could find in Antarctica, because 34 million years ago, it was a roundish continent. It is as wide as the United States. Sometimes people forget that. It's a huge continent. And it had been originally in what is known as Pangaea. That's when the land masses of this particular planet were together, and Africa was sort of at the center and the others were around it. And starting about 170, 180 million years ago, whatever was the geophysical reason happening from inside the core of the Earth, expanding the Earth, whatever happened, that's when Pangaea, the big landmass, began to break up, and this roundish mass at what would be sort of in a computer simulation at the tip of the African continent, that roundish Antarctica and other pieces of land, Antarctica started going down, 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 down for 100 million years at least, to ending up in the South Pole. And here is a fact based on the pollen examinations and other looking at stratified layers in certain parts of Antarctica, they concluded that up until 34 million years ago, it was hot and tropical. And it was hot and tropical for those 80, 90 million years, depending upon where you start, the separation from Pangaea and it being tropical. And then comes the mystery, well, what happened 34 million years ago that it would suddenly start building up ice, which is the consensus of geophysicists.
Right.
Nothing else was building up ice, but Antarctica was building up ice. And then by 33 million years ago, the ice was in that 2 mile depth and never, ever left that path in the last 32 million years of losing this deep, deep, deep ice, except for a question mark 14 million years ago. And at 14 million years ago, there seems to be some evidence that something happened, and there might have been a brief period where it began warming and things melting a bit, and then it slammed right back to the 2 to 3 mile deep ice. It is a very strange history. The more you study it, the weirder it becomes. And now we're in a whole planet that is warming, and that we're getting measurements and getting news reports all the time about Greenland and Arctic and especially West Antarctica melting at increasingly rapid rates. Now, that is important to keep in mind that Western Antarctica, that's like one environment. Eastern Antarctica, which is the biggest part of Antarctica, it includes, if you go down to, well, on maps, you know how or Antarctica, from a certain point of view, looks a bit like it has a elephant's nose coming out?
Yes, yes.
And what you want to do whenever you see that elephant's nose, because people place Antarctica in every conceivable position in maps. And the one that the military people I've worked with, that they prefer the most is when McMurdo, our base, the U.S. base, is at the bottom of the map, and that's where the Ross Sea is. Well, if you are looking at Australia with the Ross Sea and McMurdo, our base, at the bottom, if you go to where your right hand would be from looking at McMurdo, you are going into East Antarctica, and the Admiralty Mountains are about 460 miles from McMurdo. That's where that huge oriental black face is. If you continue with your right hand just sweeping around the bottom of Antarctica, you come to Wilkes Land. Wilkes Land has the greatest magnetic anomaly known to geophysicists on Earth. They call it the Wilkes Land Magnetic Anomaly. Now, this is fascinating because we'll call it the public geophysics explanation is that it must be a magnetic metal-rich asteroid that crashed into Antarctica several million years ago, and that has to explain the Wilkes magnetic anomaly.
I got to take a break right here. Let me jump in. I got to take a break. Our guest tonight, Linda Moulton Howe. We're talking about the face in Antarctica. Absolutely
and there's
incredible.
Another explanation.
And we'll do that when we come back because it's Linda Moulton Howe. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black on the Game Changer Network and KGRA, The Planet. Stay with us. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Linda Moulton Howe is with us. I want to remind everybody about the week we have coming up on Fade to Black. Tomorrow night, Adam Apollo is here for the first time. And then Wednesday night, actor, comedian, researcher Rhys Darby. It's going to be a great week here on the show. Tonight is Linda Moulton Howe. Linda, you got a chance to hang out with Rhys at Contact in the Desert. That was pretty fun, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I love Contact in the Desert.
Rhys, you did Rhys's podcast, right?
Yeah.
And
yes, I did, and it was fun.
What do you make? He's a very successful comedian and actor and all of that, but his knowledge is right there, isn't it?
It was current, sharp, smart, and sometimes we need comedy and the ability to laugh in order to keep going. And we were talking all over the map, and he asks excellent questions. I really, really enjoyed that. I hope they have him back again.
Yeah, he's really cool. So I've got him for a full 2.5 hours on Wednesday night. So it's going to be cool. This is going to be really cool.
That's good.
Now,
just before the break, just to finish out that round, when I was talking about Wilkes Land, and the fact that the Wilkes Land magnetic anomaly is the greatest one on the planet. When I was doing the videotape with Spartan 1 and Spartan 2 for my 4 Whistleblower videos, and Spartan 1 is a Navy SEAL commander, was a lieutenant commander when he was there in 2004, in August, 2003 in August, and he walked the big architecture. He was there to extract a scientist who had been there for a long time trying to analyze the hieroglyphs and the symbols carved 7 centimeters. Everything was carved 7 centimeters into this hard, black, dark stone that was a technological astounding. And that was when Spartan 1 learned about the Wilkes Land magnetic anomaly. You can Google it, and I've done work about it, and it's in my videos. And you will find that geophysicists will say that it is probably a metal-rich meteorite that is magnetic. What Spartan 1 was told is that the Wilkes Land magnetic anomaly is actually other intelligence technology deep under that ice. So there is something that we can physically measure on the surface in terms of magnetic fields. But the white world explanation is that it is an asteroid. The black world is that it is non-human technology.
The other part about this that I find so fascinating is the face on the side of the mountain is 200 miles from the Zucchelli station and 400 miles from McMurdo.
Right.
They have the opportunity to go and explore there, and I think that they already have. I don't know if you've noticed or have gotten email or anything from any of your audience, but when I presented this, I got about a dozen or so emails from people that were searching the area around the face, and they found multiple people sent me the same thing. I had to go back and look. It looks like a little white square, certainly not natural, like a little monolith off of the left side of the face out in the snow. The snow's perfectly smooth, and you have this looks like some type of monitoring device or something that could be, from McMurdo or Zucchelli, and I think that they know that face is there.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure. And then the issue to me is it because they can't control melt and that it is melting fast? Is that why that if they could, they would have taken a snowblower and kept it covered up, and that we're now at a time on Earth where melting ice is going to reveal more and more structures? That, to me, is something that seems possible, and that in this case, this huge head, somebody must have known that it was peeking through that ice and snow back in 2004, and that was 15 years ago.
What do you make of, I wanted to ask you this. I'm looking at my collection of images here of it, and it looks to me, Linda, that the eyebrows and the ridges for, the skull, the ridges for your eyebrows are there, and it's symmetrical on the left side, and there is another eye there, identical and symmetrical to the right side of the face. What do you make of that? Are those ridges identical?
Well, I think, and so did the Navy captain, that the face is a face because the features are balanced.
Right. I see two eyebrows. I clearly see two eyebrows there, and I see two ears. And I wanted to ask you one last question on this, too. It looks like on the left side of the nose, it looks like two entrances there, two doorways. Do you have any opinion on what we're seeing?
I have tried not to go into interpretation.
I know.
And I talked with Mark Wood. I said, what about if a group of us said, let's get some geophysicists and let's go down there, would we be able to go to the Admiralty Mountain and explore? And he said it's so tightly controlled that even if you have a cruise that'll go to the Antarctic, it's all controlled. And therefore, we're in an ironic situation where there's this massive continent which is being increasingly linked to architecture deep under the ice, a half-mile carved head in the Admiralty Mountains, where the rest of us on the planet won't be allowed to go.
The McMurdo is 400 miles away, and I would think that they have an airstrip there, and that you would be able to at least fly over it. But I don't know how you would arrange that. But it's so close. Out of all of the bases that are there, right? You have Zucchelli and you have McMurdo virtually in the backyard of this face. And so it says to me, like I said, they know it's there. Would they allow civilian access to it?
Well, that's what Mark and I talked about, and I had a recording of him in my Earth Files YouTube broadcast that I do every Wednesday night, and it was very interesting to hear him speaking as somebody who is familiar with military rules and knowing something about Antarctica. And when I said, could we as Americans, could we just say we're going to go to Antarctica? We want to go see this face. What would happen? And he basically said, you're not going to get there under the current rules. And that is something that we all have to face, that we are now on a world where even if there is archaeology that could go back 34 million years to the last time that Antarctica was free of ice, and that it could be covering, as Spartan 1 says, those are 62-acre sites that he was in, all carved, and that there were 6 of them, 6 62-acre sites where he was, and his understanding was that there were many more vast. All of this 2 miles down. Now, I would like to bring up something that I got a lot of emails from people saying, I've been in the Navy, I've been military, and I know there is no such thing as a sub that can go down 2 miles. Well, I took some of those emails to a military source who is in the black world, and I said, and he's been to Antarctica, and he's been where these other structures are, where he knows that Spartan 1 is telling the truth. And but he's not on video or audio, and the communication is not by phone or email or anything like that. But I have been able to get reality checks with this source over the past 3 years, and he's been absolutely correct about everything. So I got to him this question that some people have been emailing from engineers and military people who say it is impossible to take a submarine down 2 miles to access a submarine docking facility as described by Spartan 1 and others, because the argument has been that we don't have materials to build subs that could sustain those pressures. Here is an answer from a confidential naval military source who's been to Antarctica, who has been at what they call the submarine docking facility. Quote, I know that terahertz frequencies, that comes up in the bismuth magnesium zinc research, that is allegedly metal pulled off the bottom of wedge-shaped craft going back to the 40s that Dr. Hal Puthoff and others have been trying to study for a long time. Terahertz frequencies come up in the John Burroughs case. Mm-hmm. So this is coming from this military source. Terahertz frequencies can penetrate the Earth's crust about 2 miles down in the white world. Otherwise, in the black world, the depth is classified. Our current black sub-fleet can easily reach well beyond 2 miles deep. Our ability to deep dive has been revolutionized by incredible science, and when he says incredible science, he means the back engineering of other intelligence technology, has been revolutionized by incredible science in the black world that includes materials applied in theoretical physics, time travel, portals, cyborgs, robotics, computing, and so on. We can go to incredible classified depths. For white world engineers and scientists, their exposure to this knowledge is limited, given the fact that all access is severely limited, close quote. And I think that sums up our planet today.
Yeah. Did the at that depth, I think what they normally talk about, and I'm talking about the United States Navy, they always throw around the number 500 feet, right? That's crush depth. That's it. Our nuclear submarines, that's as far as they go. Well, we know.
No, that's not true.
That's right. Well, we know that. But they don't want anybody else to think that we can go past 500 feet.
Well, you are just making another metaphor for all of us.
I know.
That we are treated as a civilization of 5.7 billion Homo sapiens standing up primates. We are treated by these so-called elite power brokers as if we are truly idiots. And that being able to manipulate, counterintelligence has field days, that we are treated as if we are so stupid that all of these strange, bizarre things that are floated as no, this can't happen because this can't, and so forth, is a kind of an insult to and an abuse in a way of the general human family, because it means that it isn't just racial divisions, it isn't just religious divisions, it isn't just money divisions on this planet. It is a complete and total disdain, an attitude of disdain by the power brokers, whoever they are, 1/1% a complete disdain for the rest of us who are fellow humans. And I think that's why I work as hard as I do, is that I actually really feel in my heart and my soul that we as a human family are on a planet that is not run for humans. It is run for other purposes. If it were run for humans, they would not be millions of children that are starving tonight and the hundreds of thousands that are dying all the time. There's something really wrong with this picture on Earth.
Don't they understand that we now have the ability to freely communicate all around the world, and that we not only can share information, but we can make friendships around the world where we can freely share information and images and video, that they don't have the control of communication that they did in the past, and their number's going to get called. That's I understand the disdain part, but it's also going to spin out of control. You remember the
how would you understand the disdain?
Yeah, I know.
How would you, Jimmy Church, how do you define and understand disdain by the power brokers to all the rest of the human family? Why is there such disdain?
Because I have found out, like so many others, the big lie. And the big lie, Linda, to me, is that nothing that we are told is the truth. Everything is sent through a filter. And all you have to do is take the time to dig into any story, any fact, any piece of history, any of it, and just find out that we've been misled. And that is disdain. That is a total lack of God, compassion is the wrong word, of concern.
Humans are their fodder.
That's right. And that's how I feel. And I think we're all waking up to that now, because we have, not only people like you, but we have information resources now like never before. 20 years ago, they could still control it. They can't do that today.
And yet we know that Google takes marching orders from the CIA. It's been printed about that they have. They made deals. And so the whole internet, the whole digital world, 5G coming upon us so fast. And they say that the sweetheart sex appeal of 5G that they've tried to push is that we're going to be able to download 2-hour movies in 2 seconds or something. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, there is great dispute. There's nothing settled that I know about the impact that the 5G frequency is going to have on Earth life. For a matter of fact, it's my understanding that in some places where 5G has been operating, trees for X number of yards, trees have died where the 5G is. But here, that makes the back to this point that we're on a planet in which it's not being run at all for our health and for us, is if 5G were dangerous, there is a corporate or power broker mindset that 5G must now be installed, and come hell or high water, and it doesn't matter what the data says about its impact on Earth life. That is what I mean about we're on a planet now, and where decisions and laws and motion of money and power are being moved for the 1/1% and not for all the rest of the billions of us.
I haven't seen any medical studies on 5G. It's like they bypassed all of it. We don't need to do that. We're just going to push this through.
But when you talk to physicists, they will tell you, there can be a big danger.
That's right. And I have heard something else that where 5G towers have been installed, like no butterflies, no bees, no action.
Yeah, like the trees die.
Right.
So what is going to happen? And why is it? How is it that we have reached this point at what will be I started to say the beginning of the 20s, but let's say the middle of the 21st century, that we as a human family have lost all impact on all of the big forces that are running the Earth.
I used to...
Right now, 98%, I read it today in the New York Times, 98% of something like that, I'm pretty sure it was a huge number, of Americans want to have background checks increased on weapons. And yet, nothing happens in the so-called representative government.
I remember, and I know that you do, I remember growing up, butterflies were everywhere.
Yeah.
Good God, butterfly. Today, Linda, if I see one monarch, I jump up and down in excitement.
I know. Me too.
It's bizarre to me. It's like, where did everything go? Where did all the bees go? Where did all of this natural existence? Where did it all go?
Oh, and it was the huge. They estimated 500 million bees died where they had turned on 5G towers.
That's right. I had just read that. And
yeah, and so it's as if something is putting priorities on a certain kind of superstructure of technology on this planet that is completely, the priority is completely disconnected from the impact on Earth life. What is happening in Brazil now? The Amazon is, and always has been since humans have understood the way the Earth works, that has been the lungs of the Earth, and that was not an idle phrase. The oxygen coming from the Amazon, I believe it's something like provides 25% of the oxygen for Earth life to breathe, that one place. If you take out the Amazon rainforest, I'm not really sure what the consequences would be on the atmosphere balance of oxygen and nitrogen and carbon dioxide and stuff that we breathe. When does the takedown of nature, like the Amazon in Brazil, and then there is another one in Africa that is called the second lungs, it's burning this year as well. If those two lungs of the Earth were completely decimated, what would happen to the atmospheric balance of gases on the Earth? And the fact that these questions are being raised means that the forces at work are so huge and having planetary impact that we humans, individually and as a collective, we aren't even, it's like we're not even being considered.
The balance of, when you look at the circulation of air around the world, where everything goes in balance, off of the Sahara, from Africa, up into the atmosphere, down into the ocean, feeding the algae, across the Atlantic, back out of the water, into Brazil, into the rainforest, and what that creates, not only oxygen, but other things that go into the atmosphere, lots of action going on, back into the ocean and back out. You take away any of that, and the chain breaks, we go. That's it.
It's like dominoes falling.
That's it.
And Jimmy, in the past, I believe it's the past 15 years, 15 to 20, the global warming temperature, approximately 95% of the heat has been absorbed by the oceans to date. When does a certain saturation hit there, and then there would be an acceleration in warmth, meaning the oceans have helped us. They've helped us tremendously because they've been absorbing a lot of the heat that has been being accelerated by the blanket of CO2 and methane that's been building up. Mm-hmm. And now there are real studies about what happens going forward to the rest of this century, because how much more can the oceans absorb from the heat?
Yeah, at one point, we got to take a break right here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about cattle mutilations. But but this is the thing. At one point, Linda, we all know it. Mother Earth is going to burp, right? It's not going to take much to tip, and when it happens, it's going to be nothing but bad news. We need to fix it now. That's all. We just need to fix it now. and make sure that our children and grandchildren and everybody else has got something to live on. And that's where we're at today. There's no question about it. Our guest tonight, Linda Moulton Howe. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This story broke back in August. Cattle mutilations once again are surfacing. We're going to discuss all of this with Linda when we come back after this short break. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. You can follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. You can follow Linda at Earth Files on Twitter. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Linda Moulton Howe. Always a great conversation. Tomorrow night, Adam Apollo is here. Wednesday night, Reese Darby. Thursday night, Fader night, open lines all night long. Tonight, it's Linda Moulton Howe. And this story, which broke back on August 7th, 2019, about these cattle mutilations up at the Malheur National Forest, which is about 20 miles from Burns, Oregon. When you got wind of this, Linda, what went through your mind first?
The very first headline, 5 bulls bloodlessly mutilated in Harney County, Oregon. And no bullets. This was the most important part of the first story that I read, because some people were reporting that these were 5 bulls that had been killed with bullets to be harvested for meat. What I've learned over the last 40 years, where I began my investigations of mutilations back in September of 79, exactly 40 years ago, is that counterintelligence, whether they're working for the CIA, NSA, DIA, or sheriffs that have been told this is what you say, they will immediately jump into mutilation stories and say that there were bullets, or that it was something having to do with people who were killing the animals for meat. And it's not true. So this was so important to read, and I put this as my top quote in my August 4th earthfiles.com. It is Colby Marshall, the vice president of the Silvies Valley Ranch, where these 5 bulls were found bloodlessly mutilated in Harney County, Oregon. And here's what he said, quote, "There are no entry wounds. A metal detector revealed no bullets. There were no outward signs of a struggle, no rope burns on trees, no scattered hoof prints, no strangulation marks. The bulls look like they simply fell over and died," close quote. And as I was looking at this article, if you went to my first documentary that was broadcast on the CBS station in Denver, Colorado on May 25th, 1980, and you saw all of the animals that I photographed for that documentary back in that year, and then if you jump to 1989 and you looked at all of the photographs in my 465-page book, An Alien Harvest, and it's full of photographs, there's no blood, and that the lack of blood is where I had some of my most, I would say, intriguing pathology examinations. When I worked with a pathologist, and I would go and get excision. I've personally gone into pastures, 30 of these animals, carrying formalin solution and scissors or a scalpel with the kinds of tags that you put on I would put, here is the sheriff's cut, often with scissors, jagged. Here is the mutilator's cut, usually very perfect, harder than the rest of the tissue. And then there would be my cut around both of those, if you can imagine that in your mind's eye. And that, so the pathologist would know which cut was which cut. Mm-hmm. And over again, on these bloodless animals, we would find that the collagen had been cooked, the hemoglobin had been cooked. This was in formal pathology reports. That would explain why there was no blood coming from any of the excisions. And that in these photographs, in my books and in the documentaries that I have done, that if you look at this bull, one of the 5 that came out in the August 2nd Capitol Press in Oregon, you will find images in my work going back 40 years that look like this. Mm-hmm. So nothing changes. The animals look the same, and I'll tell you, so that people will understand that law enforcement, right from the beginning, going all the way back to the early 60s at least, if not before, they started looking to the sky themselves 70 years ago, 60 years ago, 50 years ago, because here's a classic case that sums up the eerie places that I have been. This was a 1,700-pound steer. It was in Logan County in northern Colorado, where they had, in an 18-month period, they had 200 and some mutilations. I saw every one of those files. And this was, that particular timeline was between 74 and 76. They had many more, but that I was picking years. And the sheriff was Tex Graves, and he and his deputy were called out to take a look at this steer by the rancher who couldn't comprehend what had happened. And the rancher had not walked onto the dust around that mutilated steer on purpose because he wanted the sheriff and the deputy to see. Here is the 1,700-pound steer lying on its right side. The front legs are perfectly parallel. The back legs are perfectly parallel. The animal is lying in a large, we'll call it a pool of dust, as Colorado and New Mexico, when it's dry, no grass will even grow. And these are some of the sites that these bodies are found on. So you would be able to see, you would think, the animal's own tracks walking up to the site, and they aren't there. You would assume that whatever it is that took the animal down, there would be some signs of something, or signs of struggle, even where the animal's own legs are out there so parallel, nothing. And Sheriff Tex Graves said he and the deputy, upon arriving, they said, let's go out 12, 15 feet, and let's take photos all the way around this animal before our feet go onto this dust, right, so that you can see that there's no prints. And I have those Polaroids and copies. And then the sheriff said, when I got up to the body, I'm looking at ear missing, eye, tongue, jaw, flesh, genitals, rectum cord out, like is the classic in all of the thousands and thousands of mutilations around this planet, going all the way back to the first half of the 20th century at least. He said, we could see that the head itself was in a hole. And he carried one of those plastic things like engineers do in his left pocket, and he always had a ruler in there and pens. And he took out his ruler and he put it down in that hole, and it went down in the report, 8-inch deep hole. And he said the deputy and I concluded the only thing that we could figure out had happened, that something had the ability to paralyze, hold in place the 1,700-pound steer on all of that dusty ground and leave only its head to move. And that all of the excisions were bloodlessly removed, and whatever that animal was feeling, the only thing it could move was its head, and in its agony, it dug the 8-inch hole with its head that was down in the hole, while the rest of the body was on the flat ground. And the sheriff said, Linda, that was one of the cases that left me with nightmares, because he said, the only thing that we can conclude when you are looking at precise surgery, no blood, no tracks anywhere around a body, you have to conclude if 2 + 2 = 4, this animal was lifted up somehow, taken someplace, the surgery was done, and then it was returned. But even when we said that to each other, this animal must have been taken away, the deputy said, but how did it dig that hole? And he said, at that point, the sheriff, I could understand that our logic applied to the bodies where the heads were not in 8-inch holes, and that this case in Logan County of that steer broke all the rules, and that for Sheriff Tex Graves, this was another benchmark, that they were dealing with something that was intelligent, purposeful, could control the animal, and leave the head maybe as an experiment to move.
Everything that you just described here applies to what just happened in Oregon. I've looked at all of the pictures. I've looked for disturbance in the ground. I see no footprints. I don't see anything. The cows are just simply on their side with their legs parallel. The incision marks. There is no discoloration. In the ground. There's no blood. Nothing. But a carcass with these incisions. No meat removed. There isn't any of that. They went over everything with metal detectors. There's nothing metal. There's no bullets involved. It's about as textbook as it gets from all of your reporting.
Yeah, and now add to this the eyewitnesses who have seen beams of light come down in their pastures. I talked with half a dozen ranchers back in 79 to 80 when I was producing A Strange Harvest, and they told me that they had seen with their own eyes beams come down out of the sky and had either seen an animal rise in a beam or lowered, and that they were terrified, and that they would not stand in front of my camera and say what they had seen because they didn't want their fellow human beings to tell them that they were crazy. Jump to about 10 years ago, down in, this case that I'm thinking of was in Brazil. And I still can remember this vividly. 2 men in a fishing boat on a river. And I think it was dusk. And they see a round object in the sky. And they see the round disc put a beam down into the river. They couldn't see what was going up in the beam, but they saw something rising in the beam. At exactly that same time that those fishermen reported this round object putting this beam down into the river, animal mutilations were being reported all over. In Brazil and Argentina and that area have had, I remember that there was one estimate by SENASA, which is a Department of Agriculture in Brazil and Argentina and that area, and they reported that they thought within I think it was 4 or 5 years, that they'd had 3,000 cases of mutilated animals reported to their version of the Department of Agriculture. And there's a story about that at Earth Files going back somewhere to around the 2000 to 2004 period. And when you realize that it's ongoing now. As we are seeing another cycle of these bloodless mutilations in Oregon, there are reports in Brazil, in Argentina, and half cats. Half cats are being reported in Washington, in Oregon, in more around the London area. Maybe a lot of people listening don't realize that going back to the fall of 2015 to date, officially there have been, they say, 500 plus, I believe is the way the UK puts it, 500 plus cases of half cats and mutilated small animals in a region between Croydon and London going north about the same distance to Croydon. Croydon is a suburb of London to the south, and so if you go into downtown London and then you went north about that same distance and you drew a circle around London, 550 some cats, no blood, cut in half, front half left, back half left, sometimes legs cut off, no blood ever. Not on the fur, not on the ground.
All with clean cuts.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the sheriff up in Oregon, once again, this is Sheriff Jenkins. This is the sheriff who is investigating this case, said that only a few parts of the carcass were removed from each of these bulls, the anus, the scrotum, testicles, and tongues. And then he goes on to say that none of this was chewed. He is quoted right here. He says everything was a clean cut. I'm quoting. He says the parts were definitely cut out with a sharp blade. Yeah,
exactly. And you can see that it's like Groundhog's Day for me.
Right.
40 years.
Right.
I have been dealing with the same types of cases in a world in which counterintelligence working for governments works overtime to tell everybody that the large animal mutilations, the small animal mutilations are just, and this is their mantra, predator, disease, or satanic cults. And when I think back at all of the avenues that I researched, and I am a person who likes to get way down in the weeds in details, to me, exploring every detail that is possible is often where you get some of your best insights and information. And that when you realize that the same types of mantra that were used on the public and the media in the 60s when the first cases were making it public, and it probably went on to the beginning of the 20th century, if not back 1,000 years.
Right.
But the same types of make the public and the media go away. There's nothing here. It's predator, disease, or satanic cults. And you can easily dismiss predator, disease, and satanic cults in 24 hours of investigating the files on these animals. So it's global. It's ongoing today. And now why, let's say, Tex Graves, on my very first meeting with him up in Logan County in Sterling, that's when he looked at me and he said, Linda, I'll save you some time. The perpetrators of these animal mutilations are creatures from outer space. And I've told you that before, Jimmy, and that I felt like an electric shock hit me when he said those words. And then he guided me to the ranchers, to fellow reporters, to a lot of people to go and talk to. I talked with hundreds of people. And we got on in front of our camera, many people willing even then to talk about the situation. And I remember there was one reporter working for a newspaper that he had gotten so many calls at their newspaper desk about this white light that would emit small white lights out over Logan County in that area of Colorado. That's preceding 79. This is going back into the early 70s and the 60s. And the reporter had done where you would do like a long exposure of the sky, and you could see the motion. And those photos I have in An Alien Harvest, and I have in my second book, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 1. These are photos taken by the sheriff, by reporters working for their newspapers. The cover of my book, An Alien Harvest, the first book, it looks like a 92 coming down a 90-degree angle and another 90-degree angle. It is a time-lapse photo taken by the editor of a newspaper in Arkansas. His camera was on a tripod. He was a professional. He gets this object, and why were they out trying to do time-lapse? Because of all of the animal mutilations in that Arkansas county, and he is the editor of the newspaper, decided to stay up at night with a camera on a tripod, and he got this object in the sky coming, doing a 90-degree angle, coming a second 90-degree angle, and that is on the cover of my first book, An Alien Harvest. There's no retouching. There's nothing. This is what came on that editor's camera. And when you realize that there were so many people in so many different states and provinces and countries who knew that they were not dealing with quote-unquote predators, disease, or satanic cults, you can dismiss satanic cults immediately because satanic cults, just go and ask any priest who works on exorcisms or works having to do with satanic cults, and they will tell you when they look at animal mutilation photos, that has nothing to do with what we are dealing with. Linda, satanic cults deal with blood everywhere.
Are you prepared for another harvest, another season of something like this going down, or do you think that this hopefully just may be isolated?
Oh, no, this is absolutely consistent with going back to the 60s to today. Cycles of large and small animal mutilations. They come in cycles. In this particular area in Oregon, you can go back, and there have been mutilations there before. And in Oregon, in my book, An Alien Harvest, that's where the book is so valuable. It's like a huge archive of what places, with what photos, with what forensic evidence was being found where I start with 67, the horse in southern Colorado. So An Alien Harvest starts with the 67 mutilations and went up to 89, and then subsequently Glimpses Volume 1 picks up and goes from 89 to 94, and as my work has evolved, I have done it. I didn't start Earth Files until end of 1998, so I have been putting my animal mutilation reports, of which I don't know, there's probably 200 in there now, over the period of time of doing Earth Files. So you go back to the 60s, and the evolution has always been, let's say that we are talking about Logan County, and they measured that for over an 18-month period. It was something like 198 or 200 and some cattle, horse, goat, sheep, pig, rabbits. There's a big range of all sort of domestic animals that have been mutilated. You hear about cattle more than anything. The truth is, in 67, the first animal mutilation that went worldwide was the horse in southern Colorado. The reporter got the name and the sex wrong. It went out into the newspapers and the news world as snippy, and they called it a gelding. I personally interviewed Burl Lewis, the owner, and he laughed. He said the reporter got the sex and the name wrong. It was a female, and her name was Lady, and she was in Appaloosa. So from that period, the first horse that made international, or the first animal that made international headlines was a horse. What was going on before September of 1967 in Canada? Horse mutilations. People don't realize that horses were what were being reported first, mutilated. Then came all of the cattle cases. And today you hear people talk about cattle mutilations. Well, It has always been every domestic animal that you can think of, and then jump over to wild animals. The U.S. Forest Service, I have looked at the classic same ear, eye, tongue, jaw, genitals, rectum, cord out in deer, in elk, and then you find out that reindeer in Northern Europe, they've been affected exactly the same way. A marmot in Aspen was mutilated the same way. Foxes are found mutilated more like the cats. I don't know why. The fox is a wild creature. A cat is domestic, but you will find that the foxes can be cut up like the cats for whatever is the reason. And, people say, why, Linda, do you think cats cut in half? And I'll throw this out to you and your audience. It's a speculation of mine for some time. Because just like the cycles in time of the large animals that keep repeating and repeating geographically, there are areas that I just expect that there will be mutilations over a 10-year period, maybe a couple of times or sometimes 3 times. Well, one of those areas for the half-cats is Falls Church, Virginia. Who lives in Falls Church, Virginia?
You're going to tell me.
A lot of people who work for the government.
Right.
A lot of people who work for the CIA, NSA, DIA. Falls Church has been one of the repeating areas for mutilations like Austin, Texas, Tustin, California. You can go around state by state, and there will be places where half-cats have happened over and over again. And it began, I thought, I wonder, since the New York Times did an article about, I think it was 169 cases of half-cats in Tustin, California.
That's right.
And Toronto, Canada. And they did that New York Times article in 1989. There seemed to be a kind of beginning in the 80s of the half-cats. And I wondered, is it possible that our government and other governments have tried to make agreements, perhaps, or that we have fought some of the intelligences interacting with our planet, and that maybe there was some sort of an agreement and it got broken, and that cats, that we humans love cats, that maybe it was retaliation at a personal level, and that maybe that's why it has cycled where it has, that there is a retaliation component to focusing on something like a cat that people would love,
right,
and maybe to do with the government. Now, that is a speculation, unproved.
I got to jump in and take our break right here, Linda. And that's a frightening thought, isn't it? This is
well, we have to face up to all of it. I just don't think we should be coddled. I think we all need to know everything that's happening.
This is Fade to Black. Our guest tonight, Linda Moulton Howe. We'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Linda Moulton Howe is back with us. You can follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. The conversation is hashtag F2B. A couple of thousand tweets already tonight, but it's Linda, and we expect that. You can also follow Linda on Twitter at EarthFiles. Linda, I want to talk disclosure a little bit, and you and I, through all of the conversations we've had over the years, we haven't been able to enjoy ourselves like we are right now when it comes to disclosure. Is the door cracking open finally? How do you feel?
Oh, absolutely. I think that quote-unquote disclosure happened long ago with all of the hundreds of reports that have reached the public about technologies doing things that we humans could not do. And the best example of that is December 16th, 2017. That Saturday morning, I got to my office, and the phone started ringing. Linda, go to the New York Times. And there in the top of the headline above the fold was that big headline about aura. Remember, it was glowing auras and black money, the Pentagon's mysterious UFO program. And this was about Navy pilots operating infrared, one of them American Navy pilot David Fravor, and that they were quoted in articles in the New York Times, in Politico, in the Washington Post, sponsored or put together by To the Stars, Tom DeLonge and that group who were working with those pilots. And so they make it's a big media impact. I think that we're talking about confirmation. That was a kind of disclosure. We've had these waves of disclosure. Now what we're asking for is official governments around the world confirming. And let's go back to, for example, I have in front of me an article that I did at earthfiles.com in January 4th, 2018, only a couple of weeks after the big New York Times article. And I used the phrase, the juvenile taboo against telling truth about an alien presence. And I go into the fact that Robert Bigelow, owner of Bigelow Aerospace in Las Vegas, Nevada, who is got contracts with NASA for these blow-up buildings that may be on the moon and Mars and all over the place, said that in his world, and he ended up talking about this on 60 Minutes on May 28, 2017. He said, I am, quote, absolutely convinced that aliens exist. The alien presence is just like right under people's noses, close quote. And you can't infer anything else, but he means it's not just the air, it's below land, it's water, it's ice, it's around us. And to me, he was saying, it's confirmed. I'm asserting confirmation that alien intelligences are here and they are under our noses, whether we see them, recognize them or not, and that the policies of denial since World War II, very sophisticatedly and well organized by counterintel, has kept the public and the media at an arm's length distance from truths that have been reported all over the place by pilots and others. And I think that Robert Bigelow was basically saying, they're here, we just need confirmation. So that, to me, is what I am hoping will happen, that they will take what already has been reported and that there will be the press conference of all centuries around the world at the same time, in all time zones at the same time, a huge global event saying, now we can tell you the truth. We are not alone in this universe. There are all kinds of intelligences. Some are friendly to us. Some are hostile to us. Some are neutral to us. And with the allies, we want to assure you that world, you have nothing to be afraid of because we have allies. And I think any day, I would like to see that kind of a press conference announcing the truth to the world could occur on any day. I just hope it happens sooner than later because we are weakened when we are kept in a state of ignorance on purpose by government policies of denial and lies. We, humans, it's like what we were talking about in global climate change and all of the other things, that we humans are not given the respect that we could take truth, even if it completely and totally upends and revolutionizes all of our history, all of political science going back for centuries. It needs to be done because the truth is this is a planet that Defense Intelligence Agency man that I've talked to you and others about back in December of 1999, told me our government has proof, and he used the word proof, that 3 competing extraterrestrial civilizations have been manipulating and terraforming this planet Earth for at least 270 million years.
I remember the reaction that, reactions I have gotten over the years when I said, I don't need disclosure. I've seen what I've seen. I've witnessed things. I've discussed things. I've seen the documents. I'm okay with it. And the reaction I get, I get booed. They want what you are describing there. They want that live televised. That's disclosure for them. Yeah. They're not going to settle for anything less, will they? And I think we're ready for it.
Confirmation by the power brokers. It would be that I think that we've all been sharing pieces of truth. And how many people? I must have 1,000 letters currently in reply to my Earth Files YouTube channel broadcast that I do on Wednesday nights, where I put out certain questions, and at least 1,000 letters that begin, I've never told anyone this before.
Right.
And you realize that there is this huge interstitial plane of civilization of humans, that they have either been abducted, they've been up in a beam, they've been on a craft, they've been in a field with non-humans around them, they have been underground, they have been in all sorts of situations with things that would fall into the category of other intelligences. Why do I stress that? Because I'm now personally convinced that we are dealing with intelligences from other dimensions, that we're dealing with intelligences from other timelines, that we're dealing with intelligences from other universes, not just life in this one particular universe. I am convinced of that now. I think that the playing field is that big. And once you start getting into the questions about interdimensional penetrations by technologies and portals and other intelligences, the questions that used to be asked about quote-unquote extraterrestrials, those questions seem too simple now for how complex the whole situation is.
Right.
And in many ways, my friend and colleague Jacques Vallée was there first with his anatomy of a phenomena that went into looking at mythologies and dimensions. He has one book that's very important. It's entitled Dimensions. And I remember once in a discussion with Vallée, and he was saying, Linda, if we were dealing strictly with extraterrestrials from this universe, we wouldn't have 2,000 sightings a year, meaning that he was saying they're ever present. Okay, the part that was left out of most of our discussions back in, for me, not starting before 79, Jacques Vallée was working in the 60s. What is left out was the concept that is emerging more and more that comes from government whistleblowers and others. If we have had other intelligences that have competed with each other over this laboratory Earth, maybe fought each other, and that there were 3, that there has been a cohabitation in this big, huge planet that is 8,000 miles in diameter, 25,000 miles in circumference, and that the surface life, you, me, everybody who lives on land on the planet is living on this really thin rind of crust of land. 2/3 of the planet is water, and that if you have alien intelligences who know how to go into matter, they know how to penetrate matter, they're working at atomic levels, they would just create their bases maybe 25 miles down in the crust, and that it would be like a 2-story apartment building. We're on the top.
Right.
And they occupy a tremendous amount of area wherever the heck they want to. because they've got the technology, and they would do this not just on Earth. They'd be doing this on planetary bodies and moons throughout the Milky Way galaxy. And that suddenly you realize you could have, exactly as Robert Bigelow said, that the non-humans are under our noses, figuratively and literally, and that we have got to begin to understand we have never been alone in this universe, and that Defense Intelligence Agency analyst telling me that our government has proof that 3 competing non-human civilizations have been using this planet for at least 270 million years. Well, Homo erectus in our current model is only 2 million years old. That would mean that waves of other intelligences have been using this Earth for 268 million years beyond the first primate that stood up in Africa.
That's right.
And once you start looking at things in this perspective, a whole bunch of other things begin to make sense in terms of pyramids. The concept that there have been pyramid builders all throughout this Milky Way galaxy goes to a abductee that I talked to down in Perth, Australia, and Sydney, Australia, in that area when I was speaking a few years back for Nexus. And he had written a book, was extremely articulate, and he said that he was consciously taken to another planet in another system, and there were pyramids, big, huge pyramids. And he began to understand that the pyramids were used for 2 big I'm going to say technologies, energy, that the energy was provided by the pyramids for the entire planet, and communication. And energy and communication by pyramids has been implied as the reason that there were pyramids on this planet. But what are we fed through the centuries? That Cheops was a king's burial chamber? No. Those pyramids in Egypt were built for reasons that I think had to do with energy and technology and communication.
I was reminded. I want to get back to Jacques Vallée for a second. I'm going to make this very brief. I was with Jacques for about 30 minutes at Contact in the Desert backstage. I was going to introduce him, and he got there early. I got there early, and so we sat down and talked. And at the end of that, I'm getting ready to go out on stage and introduce him. And at the end of our little conversation, I said, "Okay, Jacques, I know you know what's going on. Just share it with me right now." He said, "Jimmy," you know how tall he is, right? He's looking down at me.
Yeah.
And he says, if everyone looks at the interdimensional aspect, they will find the answers they seek. And
interdimensionality, I think.
Right. Yeah.
Key.
And
yeah.
It was like a lightning bolt in the forehead, right? And now I've got to turn around and walk out on stage and introduce him. I couldn't even concentrate. It was like,
Well,
and
in the last 2 weeks on my Earth Files YouTube channel broadcast, I have had fascinating stories from people who I interview and then put some of their stories in my Earth Files YouTube channel. And one on September 11th was with a Navy military person. He sent me his DD-214, learned a lot about his background, and he said that going back to 1975-76 period, he was on a ship in the Bermuda Triangle. And he said, all of a sudden, clear out of a completely clear sky, came what looked like a purple and green tornado that went down on its side. When he said that, I asked him to draw it for me because I didn't quite understand.
Mm-hmm.
So think of a purple and green tornado as you have seen them in photographs,
mm-hmm.
and then instead of the tornado rising up into the sky,
right,
Put it down on the like it's hovering above the water, and that's what he meant. They'd never seen anything like this, and it was swirling, violent. There was wind associated with this thing. It was horrendous, and then it leaves, and there on the water, in front of our U.S. Navy ship, is a yacht.
Oh,
and
no.
He was one of the men asked to get in some kind of a water vehicle and go over to the yacht and board it. Where did this come from? What in the heck was this green and purple tornado? And they are in the Bermuda Triangle. This is where they are. So he had the personal experience of going on with some other men onto this yacht that just emerged out of this purple and green tornado, and finds a 1958 logbook. The last date was in 1958. It was being written by the husband of a family that aboard were a husband, wife, and children. He was describing this beautiful, calm, gorgeous day, what they had cooked for breakfast. This is in this and with all these dates, 1958.
Right.
So he says they go back, they report, it's a 1958 logbook. Communication is made to some place. Who knows? But let's assume Washington. And an order comes back. Blow up the yacht. Blow up the yacht now. And he heard his superior officer try to say, but sir, it's a perfect craft. We could do blow up the yacht now. And they all watched as they torpedoed this miracle, this beautiful, shiny yacht in the Bermuda Triangle. And I said to him, when you were blowing it up, assuming this is a dimensional rift,
right,
and what happened, whatever this storm was, it was about one of these cracks between time and space, a crack that emerged this 1958 brand new yacht in the Bermuda Triangle next to this 1976 naval ship. And what might have happened if you're blowing it up? What happened? He said, it just blew up, Linda, but he said all of us on the crew, we were all saying, why are they having us blow up this beautiful yacht? Well, what does our government know about cracks in space and time, and what comes through those cracks that could have an impact in what we call our current timeline? I don't know the answer. I'm raising the question.
Sure.
Is that why they blew it up?
I had, okay, Linda, I'm going to give you the option. We've got a break here. Do you want to continue this conversation after the break?
Okay.
I see. That's why you're Linda Moulton Howe. That's why you're Linda Moulton Howe. Check this out. I got to tell you the short version of this experience, and then I want your comment when we come back. Okay. 1972. I'm 9 years old. I walk out in front of our house into the playground on the school across the street. And I look up in the sky and I see what looks like the Hindenburg, a rigid airship with the ribs, the whole thing, right? Okay. And I see it and I chase it across the field, and it's really low. And I know I'm 9 years old. I know what the Hindenburg looks like. It's not the Goodyear blimp, right? This is, a rigid, Zeppelin. It's a Zeppelin. And I chase it across the field until it disappears in the trees. About 6 months ago, and I never forgot this, right? And I had drawn it as a young kid and everything. About 6 months ago, I just remembered it. So I jumped on the internet to find what Navy Zeppelin was in Chicago in 1972, hoping I could find out which one it was, and I find out 6 months ago that there has not been a rigid Zeppelin airship anywhere in the world since 1939. Right.
And you may have had an experience
right.
exactly like that yacht coming through a dimensional time crack. And what is the physics? How does it work? And the haunting question to me, where are all of these things when they disappear from our timeline, our dimension? Where do they go? And how do they pop back from 58 to 75 and be in perfect condition?
Yeah. And when I found out, my brain didn't work. It didn't function. When I found out that there wasn't anything in the United States, anywhere in the world since 1939, now I've got an issue here because I saw what I saw. Right?
Yeah.
I can't explain it. I have a very difficult time with this. Even admitting and telling the story and trying to have people understand that I'm just telling you the truth. I'm telling you the experience. It's too crazy. Right?
And then we get to the whole big question of, are we really in a holographic universe that Michael Talbot wrote a book about, and he was an abductee, secretly a person that Bud Hopkins was working with. Talbot's book, it was The Holographic Universe, came out, I think it was 1992 or 93. It was a huge sensation, and it was Bud Hopkins who told me after Talbot died that the secret was that Michael Talbot told Bud that the whole book had been downloaded from the extraterrestrials that he was dealing with, the holographic universe.
Wow.
And if it's a holographic universe, Jimmy, it has to be being projected from another dimension. You can't have the projector in the projection. So if this universe were being projected as a hologram from another universe, how big is this creation story?
And the dimensionality of it, I got to take a break right here, but another dimension, another world is something that fits in string theory, and it's how do I say this? It's a sliver in width, but once you are there, it is just like here. And physics and string theory say that, and the only way that math works is if these extra dimensions actually exist. Our guest tonight is Linda Moulton Howe. We're going to do some overtime with Linda. We'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us. Fade to Black on the Game Changer Network and KGRA The Planet. Again, follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio, and you can follow Linda on Twitter at Earth Files. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Linda Moulton Howe. We are doing some overtime. Conversation was not ready to stop. And, okay, Linda, I'm going to ask you this question, okay? Here we go. Flying saucer, a craft, lands at the Moulton Howe estate, right? Mm-hmm. Backyard. You go out and check it out, and they go, Linda, come with us. Do you go?
It's a really good question. And I guess the only way I can honestly answer it is I have lived my entire life by my gut. And that whatever I was feeling at that moment and whatever I was looking at and whatever the frequencies were that I would want to be able. I've always wanted to have that experience where I would be with allies that knew everything about the universe, go on a craft, see everything, learn everything. That's what makes me tick in many ways. I'm so curious about the whole universe, and I would love to have a safe, friendly, extraterrestrial with a craft show me the universe. But I'm also realistic, as the remote viewers and others in the military say, not everything is friendly. So it's just like Earth with people. Some you could maybe go with and some you wouldn't want to go with, and how are we going to be educated and taught the difference? That's what this, probably the whole rest of this century is going to be about. In addition to, we have the threat of global weather change, we're going to be introduced to these other intelligences. How will humanity know what to trust? That is a big issue because we've been lied to for millennia.
So the answer is yes, then. You would go.
I would if I felt the frequencies were right. My gut was right. I would love to go. Wouldn't you love to go with somebody who had a vast intelligence and could take you around the universe and teach you all sorts of things and show, oh, my Lord.
I would go in a second. My only question would be, though, the food. It would be a really bad experience if it was bad food for a while.
It's probably not food at all. It's probably pills or...
I know, right? I know. But that would be my only question. Now, over the weekend, I want to get back to the interdimensional aspect of this, but over the weekend I was hosting Coast, and I had John Greenwald on, and I asked him this question that I would like to ask you, which is, you went through, and so did I, but you went through the early to mid 90s of some pretty exciting ufology times, right? You had Roswell, MJ12, and Lazar, your research, and the other things that were just exploding out into ufology. Those were
actually, you have to go back into 83 is when we got the Eisenhower document, and then the MJ12. Some of the material about MJ12. The 80s were where it felt, I don't know, more ominous. And by the early 90s, when Bob Wood, when we got some of them, like the Psalm 101, I remember that as being pivotal. I think it is the single most important document release. And that Psalm 101 document that Bob Wood blew up from its 35 millimeter, this was 35 millimeter negative, and he made 8.5 by 11 or 8 by 10s from. And then I remember there was a group of us, half a dozen of us, who got together at around that time that Bob had gotten the film from Don Berliner to Stanton Friedman, and Stanton called Bob. Mm-hmm. And I still remember when there were those guys and I were at a conference, and Bob wanted us to see what he was getting from those 35 millimeters. So I was one of the first people to see the content. And the Psalm 101 training manual is about extraterrestrial entities and their technology. And it's how to recover and what to do. And that was at the period then, especially 88 coming into the early 90s, it was all becoming much harder, meaning harder evidence. And that by 1993 was a year that if Churchill and Eisenhower had agreed with Truman back in the end of the World War II, that in 50 years they would tell the truth, that they would release the story. That was one of the apocryphal kind of tales that went around, that Churchill and Eisenhower and Truman had agreed in 50 years, and the war ended. It depends on which year you add that 50 to. But 1993 had been discussed as the year when confirmation that we were not alone in the universe would occur. 1993, there was just one amazing crack after another. But it was also the time when there were the political chaos around Clinton, Bill Clinton. Remember that?
Yes.
And so whatever might have been planned might have been usurped and turned upside down because of what was happening politically. And then one of the things from when you go to March 13th, 1997, 4 years after 1993, was the huge flyover by multiple objects in the state of Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
And the most important thing there was the 2-mile-long triangular craft that was seen, and estimates made by real estate people on a freeway, and that 2-mile-long triangle has been described before, and there's nobody making 2-mile-long aerial triangles in human factories anywhere on the planet. And that was truly the most important part of March 13th, 1997. But the press in Phoenix, they put out that, we'll call it the bow of lights, and the bow of lights are what went out to the world. And it was probably calculated by counter-intel. We'll take the bow of lights, which was only a tiny part of what happened in Arizona on that night, the triangle being the most important, and orange globes over Luke Air Force Base was another huge phenomenon that was not very well known to the public. Everybody was thinking about that arc of those lights. And what happens within, was it a week, 2 weeks? Luke Air Force Base said that they were flares. Well, I went down to Phoenix to interview people. It was Art Bell and me, and we were doing Coast and Dreamland at that time, and I went to Phoenix to interview people and got to go up on to one of the houses. In fact, it was the house that had the original video that you saw throughout the United States and the world of that arc of lights.
Mm-hmm.
I got to go, and they set up the tripod and they set up the camera on the terrace, and they pointed it, and now I'm looking in bright sunlight, and it is pointed right down to the town of Phoenix, downtown. There were other calculations that argued that the bow of lights was over the Estrella Mountains to the west of Phoenix. Why were those kind of confusing measurements in something that the people with the cameras knew exactly where they had the camera and where they were looking? So I think that some of that around the arc of lights, flares, all of it, that came in as confusion and counterintelligence after the major event of that 2-mile-long triangle and these strange orange globes. And here's one other piece. I think it was within a day or two after the March 1997 event that I got a phone call from a man back east in New Jersey. He ran a boutique computer kind of a lab company, and they did boutique by specifications for the Department of Defense, for the Pentagon. They made special computers. And Art Bell and I had known of this man and had talked with him before what happened in Phoenix. So he was a known quantity. And we had talked to him because of certain things that he had learned in relationship to UFOs, the Department of Defense, and computers and satellites. And then we had a background with this guy. So after the March 13th event, I think it was the very next night, he called me and he said, "Linda, just want you to know, whatever that was that came over Arizona last night, it took out one of our most valuable Department of Defense satellites." Now, there's no proof, but we're back when you get a call like that, you say, what is the chess game that is being played here? What was the relationship between the 2-mile-long triangle, the big orange lights over Luke Air Force Base, the arc of lights either over downtown Phoenix or the Estrella Mountains or both, and a report from somebody who was a known quantity that they had gotten confidential information that at the same time that this was happening over Arizona, that one of our most valuable satellites was taken out by something not from here. This is why, to me, having confirmation and then being told honestly, we have allies, we have hostiles, and there are neutrals, that we, the human family, we deserve to be told the whole truth.
Do you think that's why the Space Force is suddenly, and the Space Command has been formed, and this conversation about the defense, not only and the wording that came out last week from the Air Force about this, that both offensive and defensive capabilities need to be in space now.
I read that and underlined that sentence.
Right.
Here, let me give you the context of what I think is the real truth. Spartan 1, the Navy SEAL that I was able to work with, backlighted and voice altered in my video about Antarctica, and Spartan 2, the Marine, they both had knowledge that since the 1970s, we have had interstellar trade routes with the help of some ally non-human, and that in the interstellar trade route, we have been getting rare metals and various things, and that would mean that we would have an allyship, a friend, helping us in the United States, and China may have such a thing, Russia may have such a thing, but that we had interstellar trade routes, and this would mean that our relationship, going back to the 70s and probably into the 60s in the Apollo program, is where we began having some kind of relationships with non-human intelligences for reasons that are not exactly clear, but that they're, as Spartan 1 said, I've been told that without those allies, we may not be here. So there has been all of these below the surface, the black, when they talk about the black world versus the white world, that the knowledge and the sophistication and the relationships that have been going on apparently to some degree with advanced intelligences that have helped us have been going on since the 70s. And who comes in and would melt a satellite? Who is that? And then are there subsequent wars between non-humans and non-humans, the allies and the hostiles? I don't know the answers to those questions, but I know that it is implied that we have been working with non-humans for a very, very long time.
When you have all of the over the last couple of months, the Senate and Capitol Hill being briefed on UAPs and the Navy involved, and last week the Navy announcing that for the first time using UAP to describe the 3 videos that were released last year. President Trump talking UFOs, right, on national television. They're implying that they're trying to seek answers. I think you and I and most would agree that they already have those answers, but it's like this paradox, hypocritical communication between the rest of the world and actually what is going on. What do you make of that? The sudden...
Jimmy, I think the metaphor is wallpaper. They are trying to wallpaper the white world and the black world so that people will not see what the black world has done, and they want the white world and the black world to sort of be covered over, that they're making bridges, that the Space Force, my point was, if we have had interstellar trade since the 1970s, then the discussion of a brand new Space Force today, that's just, it's window dressing. It's wallpapering over the reality and what they need so badly. They need a public trip that establishes, quote unquote, a public base on Mars, which I understand that they have been going to Mars and a base there since the 70s as well. They need something that would explain to the general world this, a light on Mars. Oh, well, that's Elon Musk out lighting a cigarette. I'm just, just being silly. But they've got to have, or when I say they've got, what I mean is they want to be able to cover up everything that they are doing on the moon and Mars and probably beyond. Now, in this, as we move to the middle of the 21st century, they've got to have things that will cover up what they're already doing. And so I think that the Space Force is another one of those wallpaper efforts. The Space Force will then become what the media and the public at large get sort of, I don't know, what would you call it, that the Space Force will become the hallway through which they will take the public and the media into, we're going to now have a Space Force that will be offensive and defensive. They've already had it. They already have it. But they want to have this wallpaper so that they can do it in a transition that, quote unquote, won't be shocking to the world. But what I said before that last break, I do not think that humans on this planet should be coddled. I think we deserve to know absolutely everything that the so-called powers that be know. And that's the only way that humans are going to grow up, and it may be the only way that humans will stop fighting and killing each other, is when they are not coddled and they are told the whole truth about interdimensional realities, timeline manipulation, all kinds of things that would then make humans look at each other perhaps as allies of a species in a universe that is so far different than what we've been taught. And that's where I think that confirmation that it's all other intelligences, they're all there. And there's good, and there's bad, and there's neutral. And just like on Earth. And if we are taught the truth about, is this a holographic universe? Is it being projected? If it is, why are we in it? And why is what's in the holographic universe there? I don't find any of this scary. I find it exciting. I want to know everything I can possibly know about the universe we are in and the cosmos that we are in. And when I talked with Roger Penrose last year, brilliant man, about his book, Cycle of Time, he is personally convinced that there really isn't a singularity, that it is almost like infinite cycles of phases of universes and dimensions. And when you start having your mind stretched to think that infinity, a cosmos, a divine field that has no beginning and no end.
Right.
And that every single thing in it is constantly cycling, recycling, evolving, changing. And we are alive on this magnificent earth. I think this earth is incredible if we just give it a chance. That to have had the experience of being alive on this amazing Earth at the time that where a lot of us were able to have the excitement of knowing the Apollo program, watching live television, the Armstrong landing, the evolution to where we are now, knowing, in my case, the many military people have talked to me about their face-to-face with non-humans. Not that they don't beat around the bush, but they've worked with non-humans. And when you say, why can't the whole planet be told this? The vast majority of those people say we don't know. So who has a vested interest in keeping Homo sapiens sapien dumb and blind? Who has a vested interest in that?
Those that profit off of it. That's who. That's the sad part about it.
Yeah,
it's those that profit off of it. Linda, incredible conversation, young lady. Thank you so much. And really quick,
it's always fun talking with you, and I think it's because we know our audiences now they've evolved, they have grown. I get the most amazing letters and experiences. And people are way, way beyond asking anything about, are we going to have a Space Force? I am convinced that my fellow human beings are more than ready for the truth, that we're not alone in this universe, and that it is high time in 2019 or 2020 that we get confirmation that we're not alone.
Tell us about your YouTube live that you do each Wednesday night.
Well, it's really fun, and I go from 7:30 to 8:30 p.m. Mountain Time and in all time zones, and I don't over-program. I try to stay with what are the exciting headlines, and I'm delving into all of these masses of letters that I'm getting with people saying, Linda, I have never told anyone X, Y, or Z. It could be out of body. It could be straightforward discussions with something that seems to be an extraterrestrial. It could be in dreams about a future in which there may be some kind of an apocalyptic event on the planet. It could be having to do, have you been someplace and you've seen what you thought was a person in front of you and they disappear? It's amazing how many people have had that experience. And if people all over the planet have had experiences of seeing what they thought were humans pop right out in front of them, is that related directly to what Jacques Vallée, when he wrote Dimensions, when he says inner dimensions and dimensions is the key to all of this, that there are intelligences that are popping in and out of our matter world frequency in this specific dimensional frequency because they have the technology to move frequencies, dimensions, the way we would play notes on a piano. And I think that there's something very close to that. And then is the excitement, and we get into this on my Earth Files YouTube channel. When I go into exciting news headlines, I usually have a theme that I then go into and talk about, and the chats have some of the most amazing communication. And so I feel like that what's happening at my Earth Files YouTube channel on Wednesday nights is that I am having a dialogue with the world. I'm getting letters from all over the world. A lot of people can write in English coming from Korea or from another country, or they get somebody to write to me in English. And then in emails, I get from all over the world, and they can do translations. So I'm beginning to feel like I have an audience. It's growing, 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 that is global, and that the people who are beginning to talk about subjects they have never opened up before, I feel that kind of excitement when I click in live at 7:30 p.m., not knowing exactly what I'm going to learn from my audience by the end of that hour in the chats that come later. And so it's sort of like a live event in which anything could happen leading right up to 7:30 p.m., and I may have had one breaking news headline I was going to lead with, and something else comes in, and I go live with whatever is the most interesting and exciting to start. So I want to say to all of you who are coming that I love this interaction with an audience about it's everything. It isn't just UFOs and other intelligences. It has a lot to do with what is the nature of the soul. We've had penetrating, profound programs on that. And the letters that I have gotten from people who have had experiences with, say, their dying parent and are convinced that the soul of their parent came back to them, or whatever it is that our body, our organic body, is not all that we are, and that animating force, that word soul, it comes up in the abductions where the people in abductions will get a telepathic impression from whatever entity is in front of them that refers to their entity. This has happened in many cases, as if there is great interest in the soul entity that gives I think it's the life force to the life of humans, and that ultimately one of the most interesting shows I did was a discussion about what is the true special force of the human soul. And maybe if we knew the whole truth of this whole universe, other universes, other dimensions, other timelines, that we would know that the divine field maybe pulled the rug out from under manipulating intelligences and placed a strong, vibrant, unique soul in evolving primates on Earth, and that the power of the human soul is longed for and envied by the artificial intelligences and the other intelligences that interact with us. And that if we knew that truth and we lived that truth, how could Homo sapiens sapien ever kill each other again?
Linda Moulton Howe. Thank you so much, Linda, and keep doing what you're doing and never change. I know I don't need to say it, but go and do your thing. Thank you so much, Linda, and enjoy the rest of your Monday night. Thank you so much.
All right. God bless you and all of your listeners.
Thank you so much, Linda Moulton Howe. Now, very simple. All of Linda's links are over at jimmychurchradio.com. earthfiles.com, at earthfiles on Twitter, and, of course, Wednesday nights right there on YouTube. All of the information is over at earthfiles.com. We rolled right past our network break. That's because it was a great conversation. Thank you so much, Linda. Fade to Black's executive producers, Rita Camarion. Show is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee, Dennis, and Bob. Announcers are Steve Hartley, Gene Vitoa, Mark D. Kovar. Webmaster, Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldridge. Intro, Spaceboy. SpaceboyMusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. Syndication is KGRA, The Planet. This broadcast owned and copyrighted 2019 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Until tomorrow night, right here, Adam Apollo. I want everybody to be safe. Go back, Lee Tappy.